Well, we'll just get right into it. What is that? Anybody have any idea? The CICR. Been around since the late 30s. Anybody ever heard of it?
Stands for again?
The Commission on Inter-Church Relations.
Who was that pastor who was here recently from Africa who visited, and they were their group had just joined the Wells?
That was Pastor Musa, Akisimu Musa.
And is that part of it? To
That's part of it.
see what,
That's
if
part of
they
it.
gel with us.
Yep. Well, all right. This is always kind of a good thing, because then now I know that maybe you'll pick up one or two things that you didn't know today. So we start with something super exciting, and that's the Wells Constitution. That kind of tells you what the CICR, the Commission on Interchurch Relations, is. We serve under the Conference of Presidents. Know what that group is? The Conference of Presidents, that group responsible for doctrine and practice. Hey, Jill. So we serve under the Conference of Presidents, and our job is to represent our Wisconsin Synod. We have different groups, all kinds of different groups that serve in the Wisconsin Synod, but none of them represent the Synod. They represent certain functions of the Synod. But the CICR is the group that represents our Wisconsin Synod to other church bodies. Those might be church bodies with whom we already have a fellowship relationship. That might also be church bodies with whom we are exploring whether that will be possible. So we represent our Wisconsin Synod to both groups. The second thing we do is we try and keep ourselves somewhat up to date on what is going on across the broader spectrum of especially confessional Lutheranism. And we do that by reading stuff. And I'll talk more about that later. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of what the CICR, the Commission on Interchurch Relations, actually is. It is, in many respects, a fascinating work. All right, next, who's on it? You get a piece of candy if you can answer this question.
You.
I'm on it, yeah. So here's who's on it. 5 parish pastors. So right now that's Pastor John Kelpine, our Professor Kelpine's brother. John Kelpine in Dallas, Texas. Pastor John Billets, a relatively new member. He's the pastor at Madison Chapel in, obviously, Madison. He's been on a couple of years. And then we have 3 new pastors. Pastor David Barkle, who is a pastor up in Cottage Grove. Nice little congregation up there. Then we have Pastor Joel Nauman, who is pastor in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. He's brand new. He just had his first meeting. David Barkle just had his first meeting. And Dan Voigt, who is a pastor in Chicago. So John Kelpine is about my age. We were in college at the same time. Dan Voigt is about my age. We were in school at the same time. Dave Barkle is much younger. He was a student of mine here. Joel Nauman is a little older. He was a student of mine here. John Billets is also relatively young. He must not have taken German. So I'm sure he was maybe here when I was here. So 5 parish pastors, and then we have 3 seminary professors who are on the CICR. One of those is Joel Otto. He is the one who's now been on the longest. He teaches primarily church history. You maybe his name from the Wells 175th. He, at being our synod's historian currently, he was responsible for that work. Then we have Brad Wardell. Brad Ward, take that back. Brad's been on longer than Joel has. Brad Wardell was for a long, long time a missionary in Japan. So he brings that world missions experience and perspective to the CICR. And then the new guy on the block is David Bivens. And Dave Bivens teaches New Testament courses and hermeneutics, biblical interpretation. He brings also a very valuable perspective in that he was a missionary in Latin America. So he's a Portuguese speaker, which is nice. Brad, a Japanese speaker. The other nice perspective that Dave Bivens brings is that he is part of our seminary's PSI, Pastoral Studies Institute, which provides pastoral training for other men from other cultures who are living in the U.S. And then we have two professors from the other synodical schools. So that could be MLC, that's what it currently is, but it could also be LPS in Watertown, Luther Prep, or it could be MLS in Saginaw, Michigan Lutheran Seminary. I don't know if it's ever been, but theoretically, according to our synod's constitution, it could be. And I have a sneaking suspicion, maybe in the not too distant future, it might be. So that currently is me, and then Nick Schmuller, who teaches Greek here and coaches soccer. That would be all right, but we also have some other synodical heavy hitters on the Commission on Interchurch Relations. Our synod president is an ex officio member, so he's a member by virtue of his office as synod president. And he is joined by our synod's first vice president, just new to that work as of this past summer. That's Joel Voss from Centerville, Ohio. Been pastor there for a long, long time. Maybe most of his ministry. And then we have, so Joel Voss, our first vice president, is an advisory member. And then we have our seminary president. He's also an advisory member. That's Earl Treptow. And we have a Commission on Interchurch Relations administrator, and that is Larry Schlomer. If you recognize that name, that is, I'll get into that a little bit more later. That is a very welcome addition to our CICR to have Larry as our administrator, because Larry is also, his main work is the administrator for our Board for World Missions. And so I'd say that's probably about a 98%, 2% split between duties, maybe even a 99%, 1% split. But he provides a tremendously valuable perspective and helps us understand important things. Challenges us to think about things that are maybe outside of the way things have always been. That's one of Larry's gifts. So this is the Commission on Interchurch Relations, this group appointed by our Conference of Presidents that represents our Wisconsin Synod as we interact with church bodies with whom we are or are not in fellowship, and try to keep ourselves up to date on what is going on across the spectrum of Lutheranism, especially confessional Lutheranism. How do you become a member of the CICR, and for how long? You become a member when President Schrader asks you to become a member. According to the Constitution, I'll have to mention this to President Schrader because this isn't our current practice. According to the Constitution, our Conference of Presidents is supposed to recommend to our president who should be on the CICR. I can assume, I'll assume that the Conference of Presidents handed that responsibility off to the CICR. So when a position is going to be vacant, usually at the meeting before a position is going to become vacant, we gather names. Who might serve well on this commission? Now, what are we looking for? We're looking for people who are interested in doctrine. We're looking for people who we feel will be able to represent our Wisconsin Synod to other churches and maintain personal relationships. Individuals who will be able to travel. Individuals who are willing to do a fair amount of work in preparation for meetings. I mean, you maybe know meetings aren't everyone's thing. Some feel, well, that's just a waste of time, a meeting. And yet that is, to a large extent, one of the ways in which we get our work done. And so you have to have people willing to do a fair amount in order to participate knowledgeably and meaningfully when we bring everyone together. I mean, that costs money to bring people together, and you don't want to waste money to do that if people are going to come unprepared. You have to have people who have time and willingness to do this reading that we ask people to do. Outside of the regular meeting time, that throughout the course of the year. You have to have people who are willing and able to travel, and that includes to travel internationally. This is becoming an increasing responsibility of the CICR. And we have 4-year terms, and 4-year terms that you can repeat twice. So if you serve out all 3 of your terms on the CICR, that's a 12-year commitment. That's something I didn't really realize. I remember when President Schrader contacted me, I used to get migraines. I don't really get them anymore. But I had a migraine, and I was in bed yet. It was maybe a Saturday morning. I was in bed, trying to recover from a migraine. President Schrader, my wife said, President Schrader is on the phone. Well, if the president of the Synod calls you, you get up from what you're doing. And you take the phone. And I kind of said, I didn't really ask any questions. It was silly of me. Sure, I'll do that. 12 years is a long time.
What year are you in?
I'm in year 10. 10 and a half. Yep.
It says they may succeed themselves twice. Is it common to not say, hey, I've had my 4 years or my 8 years?
No. No, that doesn't happen. We had one guy who left after 2 terms, but only because he retired as a pastor. So he was then no longer eligible. So it is unusual for someone to leave before their terms are up. Doesn't mean it hasn't or doesn't happen or can't. We also tried what's the word I want? Constitution says, in far as practicable, the membership shall represent diverse geographic areas. We're not terribly diverse right now, with the exception of John Calpine in Dallas. We had asked Ben Schaefer, who was in California at the time, to be a member of the CICR, and then he accepted a call here to teach Hebrew. So we already have our 2 from Synod School, so he'll have to wait not very long. My guess is maybe within 2 years. All right, so the CICR has been around since 1938. That's when it first started, 1938. It was in 1938 that things started to get interesting. the Missouri Synod, our partner at the time in the Synodical Conference, started to make overtures to other Lutheran groups, in particular the old ALC, the American Lutheran Church. These are maybe acronyms that sound familiar to you. Maybe the most conservative of the non-synodical conference. So synodical conference is the WELS, the Missouri Synod, the Ohio Synod, the Norwegian Synod, I guess the ELS, the Illinois Synod, I think, the Augustana, there was one more smaller synod. But it's mainly WELS and Missouri and the ELS that forms the Synodical Conference. That was the confessional Lutheran grouping of church bodies in the U.S. But Missouri started to make overtures to the ALC, and as a result of that, some things they were agreeing to. The WELS formed what it called the Union Committee. And you'll notice this was a pretty high-powered committee. This was the doctrinal folks in the Wisconsin Synod, the entire seminary faculty and the entire Conference of Presidents. They made up the Union Committee, and that's the way it was for quite a few years, up through 1961, which brings us to that time when the WELS and the Missouri Synod end their relationship, their fellowship relationship, and the Synodical Conference breaks up. So for all those years, the Union Committee is working for many years to try and preserve that relationship. 1961 to 68, now it's time to deal with the fallout of the breakup. And so one thing that the Union Committee did in the aftermath of that breakup was turn its attention inward to the Wisconsin Synod itself and try and make sure that in our congregations, people appreciated, understood, and appreciated the steps that we had taken. I mean, you maybe know better than I how the direct way in which this impacted families and congregations. And so for people to understand and appreciate why the Wisconsin Synod took the action that it did. And then secondly, the Missouri Synod had been, primarily the Missouri Synod, had fellowship relationships around the world with different Lutheran church bodies. And now, so the WELS, by virtue of its relationship with the Missouri Synod and being a member in the Synodical Conference, by extension had those same fellowship relationships. If a sister church of ours is in fellowship with another group, even though we maybe haven't said that ourselves officially, well, by virtue of our relationship with that sister church, we are in a fellowship relationship with that group that they have entered into that relationship with. And so those sorts of things need to be sorted out. All of these groups around the world that Missouri had relationships with, we now had what we refer to as a triangular relationship. So you've got these two folks, and you've got these two folks who are no longer in fellowship, but you've got this group that is in fellowship here, but historically had been in fellowship also with us. So these triangular relationships have to be sorted out. And that is one of the things that's going on around the world. In the U.S., you also have other groups who are reacting to this breakup. And you've got individuals maybe in congregations who are staying with, or groups of individuals in a congregation that's staying with the Missouri Synod or staying with the Wisconsin Synod, and yet maybe you have a group in a WELS congregation who says, no, I really align with what the Missouri Synod says, and vice versa. So those things need to be sorted out. The way that's done among confessional Lutherans is with a free conference. In a free conference, you get people together to talk about doctrine, but everyone understands we're not in fellowship with each other. We're just here to talk about doctrine, to sort out questions, to make sure we understand and don't misunderstand what another person is saying. 1968, the name of the group changes from the Union Committee to the Commission on Interchurch Relations, because this was heavily doctrine. And so we wanted to communicate clearly to our synod, this is not the synod's doctrine committee. This is the synod's doctrine committee. We are interchurch relations. We have a relationship with our Conference of Presidents. We have doctrinal things we're interested in and do, but we're not responsible for doctrine and practice in the Wisconsin Synod. We worked during these years to strengthen the fellowship relationships that remained. Primarily that meant in the States, the ELS, the Evangelical Lutheran Synod. We worked through some things with them on the Lord's Supper, and then we started what's called the Wels-Els Forum. It exists to this day, where all the leaders of both church bodies sit down with each other once every other year for a day and a half, and basically we touch base. We make sure each knows what the other is doing. It's a chance to ask any questions that you have, and it's just a way in which we try and stay connected with each other, one of the ways. We also continue to sort out fellowship relationships around the world. In most instances, groups remained with the Missouri Synod. The one exception would be the ELFK, which is our sister church in Germany. It's our strongest European partner. Next year we'll give thanks to God for 150 years of fellowship with the ELFK. That doesn't happen all that often. We established new fellowship relationships. The LBK, sorry for all the alphabet soup, but it's hard to write all these things out. This is the Lutheran Confessional Church in Scandinavia. There's the LBK Norway, the LBK Sweden, and the LBK Finland. And that was Dr. Sigbert Becker from our seminary who was instrumental in establishing those relationships. Nigeria, there was a group in Nigeria that had been connected with the Missouri Synod. It ended that relationship and entered into a fellowship relationship with the Wisconsin Synod. There was a group in Cameroon with whom we began a fellowship relationship. Also in these years, we have the first round of an attempt to reestablish fellowship with the CLC, the Church of the Lutheran Confession. This group that had broken away from the Wisconsin Synod during the mid-50s because they felt Wells should have ended its relationship with the Missouri Synod sooner. It was a costly break for us, cost us a synod or a seminary president. And a fair number of pastors and congregations. It was also during these years that we formed a new international fellowship, the CELC, the Confessional Evangelical Lutheran Conference. I want to say maybe it started with 13 churches. It's up now to 33. These aren't large groups, but this international fellowship is really, really important for these small, scattered groups. I'll talk about more about that later. Also during these years, the CICR revised these two key WELS publications that we use with sister churches and those who are interested in becoming sister churches. This, we believe, maybe you've seen that one, just provides a nice overview of what WELS believes and teaches. And then the more technical one, Doctrinal Statements of the WELS. Professor Wessel once said something that has always stuck with me, and that is that doctrinal statements are they're battle scars They're battle scars. You don't come up with a doctrinal statement because you're sitting in your office on a Monday board and don't know what else to do. You come up with a doctrinal statement because there is a question, an issue that has surfaced, and it has caused some trouble. And you need to state clearly what it is you believe and what it is you don't believe. And in that respect, they're battle scars. And the reason I say that, I'll come back to that a little later, the reason why I say that. So these two publications are actually CICR publications. 2000 to 2007, we begin to expand our relationships. A second group in Nigeria, that's also always an interesting thing. You know, you might think to yourself, why do we have two small separate groups in Nigeria and in India and in Uganda and in Australia? And the answer is the same reason we have Cortland and Brighton Township. That's why. Because it's just the reality of church life. It doesn't necessarily mean there's any bad blood, it just means there's some history. And just like small congregations aren't always super excited to close up shop and become one merged congregation, what's happening more, so also church bodies don't like to do that. There was a time when the Missouri Synod under Walther's leadership was basically insisting that the Wells cease to exist as a separate church body and join the Missouri Synod. And the Wells said at the time, thank you, but no thank you. We have our own history and we want to preserve that. So I guess we can't fault other church bodies for doing the same thing. We also, during these years, started what we called the Contact Man program. So in the breakup of the Synodical Conference, there were really very few groups with whom we had to stay in contact. But now the number of groups is starting to grow. And how are we going to stay in contact with them? The way we did it was we appointed individuals from the CICR as contact men, is what they were called. When I first came onto the CICR, I was the contact man for our church in Germany. It was my job to be responsible for that relationship, to attend things in Germany, to remain in contact, to get to know the people, to know what was going on in that church body, to pray for that church body, and to offer help, the Wells encouragement and support for that church body. It's hard for us to understand here in the United States how important it is for those kinds of relationships. When you are a group like in Germany, you're a group of 1,200 people. You feel small and you feel alone in this big world. And to know there's somebody else in the world who knows we're here, who appreciates the fact that we're here, who prays for us, who comes to visit with us. This is an important thing when you feel very small and alone in the world. Latvia, I didn't mention. Latvia is a place where we also expanded a relationship. The ULC, that is the church in Ukraine, an interesting place for a sister church these days. Indonesia and Portugal. I mean, I think of, how important it is in a place like Ukraine right now to know there are others in the world who know about us, who are concerned about us, who are supporting us. God's people were generous when that war broke out. We received, I want to say, over $1 million, maybe Joe would probably know better than I, $2 million to support people in Ukraine. It's almost gone. Now that we're, 3 years in? We have supported them tremendously. We also started a series of project funds. So in order to enable our contact men to travel and to provide things for sister churches, again, God's people were generous. The one I know best is the Germany Support Fund. One of the ways that fund has been used, we have for over 40 years, had a nice program with the church in Germany where they send young people for a year at Michigan, most often at Michigan Lutheran Seminary, our high school in Saginaw. And they get to know WELS for an entire year in this very personal way. 25% of their pastorate did that. I mean, you want to develop a strong partnership with a church body, that's a way to do it. The Project Fund supports that. We provide them with subscriptions to Forward in Christ and to Wisconsin Lutheran Quarterly, so they can keep up to date on what's going on in the Wisconsin Synod. That's what these project funds are used for. 2008 to 2019, we have increasing cooperation with the Board for World Missions. And this is getting to why it's so helpful and valuable for us to have Larry, our administrator for World Missions, as our CICR administrator. We simply interact with, we cross paths with World Missions more and more and more. Because the vast majority of our sister churches have become that through the initial work of World Missions. World Missions goes, a church is planted, a church grows, a church develops, a church matures, and it becomes then a sister church. Because it's a sister church, the CICR is responsible for our WELS relationship with it. Because that sister church is often still receiving either manpower or money from WELS Missions, they need also to be involved in that relationship. They have the expertise there. And so World Missions and CICR develop an arrangement. If there's money or manpower in the mix, then World Missions takes the lead in that relationship. If the church is self-supporting, self-disciplining, and self-governing, the three selves, then the CICR takes the lead in that relationship. That's how the arrangement worked. But we still operated independently of each other. We continue to grow Puerto Rico during this time, Salem, which is the church in Hong Kong, Ethiopia, East Asia, we speak very broadly there, and then Taiwan and Kenya all enter into fellowship, churches there. We expand our contact man program as our relationships are growing. 2012, we begin our informal talks with the Missouri Synod. You maybe read about those. There was an article a couple of months ago in Forward in Christ. If you get President Schrader's Together newsletter, the e-newsletter, he spoke about that as well. Not this past Synod convention, but the convention before, asked the Synod, the CICR, President Schrader, to please keep it more informed on these informal talks, to know in more detail what exactly people were talking about and to explain better the nature of these talks. And so we try to do that with the Together newsletter and the Forward in Christ article. Formal talks with the CLC round 2, those started in 2015. They ended a few years back. Again, a second unsuccessful attempt to restore that relationship. Something we're sad about. We added an administrator. At first it was Paul Prangy, and then we transitioned from Paul Prangy to Larry. And we developed what we call the CICR toolkit. As the nature of the CICR's work began to change as we expanded more and more. And I'll come back to that toolkit later. 2020, we entered the next chapter with World Missions so that now we have full integration with World Missions. Its head is also our administrator, and we have members of the CICR who are plugged into each of the World Missions, what they call one teams. So that's an overview of how the CICR started to where it is today. So we are not the doctrinal commission of the Wisconsin Synod. That's the COP. That makes us the odd man out among confessional Lutheran church bodies. The most of them in the states, Missouri, ELS, and the CLC all have a doctrinal commission, and that doctrinal commission is responsible for interchurch relations. In the WELS, we do it differently. Here's one of the saddest parts of our work. I don't know, did you ever have a sister or brother? And in this beautiful, harmonious family relationship with your sibling, you got into a little bit of a disagreement, huh? Did that ever happen to you and your family? Joyce says, no, it never happened to me. That was much too sweet. Well, this happens, that sisters have trouble with each other. And as I say, this is a sad part of our work, where the world missions folks on the ground, who are the first and primary point of contact with these sister churches, will contact us and say we have an issue going on between these two sister churches. Could you please help us? It's a hard thing. This is one of the nice benefits of the one-team relationship that we have now, because up to this point, the CICR was not directly plugged into our world mission fields. And so all of a sudden we get a phone call. This happened when I first came on the CICR. We get a phone call from a world missionary who says, hey, we've got a problem with this group. We need you to come and fix it. And the problem is, you know, between this individual and that individual, and I'm like, I've never heard of that guy. I have no idea who that is. I've never met that person before. You can imagine how complicated that is. You don't know any of the issues. You have zero knowledge of any of the issues. And now all of a sudden you're supposed to come into that setting and try and resolve that issue when you don't know the people and you don't know the issue. So we have since rectified that with the current relationship we have with world missions. But as I say, this is a sad part of the CICR's work. I mentioned before we do a lot of reading outside of our meetings. It used to be just periodicals, you know, kind of like you're reading the other church body's Forward in Christ magazine, and you're reading their Wisconsin Lutheran Quarterly. You want to know, what are they talking about? What did they think was worthwhile to publish? What are they talking about, and what are they saying about it? We also increasingly are paying attention to websites. I mean, print is expensive. If you're a small group, how are you going to put out something in print? Produce it, mail it. So now you have a website. You can do that fairly inexpensively. And so we monitor websites. People publish articles there. That's how they get their information out. And someone said at our last meeting, you know what? Podcasts are a thing. Lots and lots of people are listening to podcasts. That's how people are putting out their content. And you know what? We ought to be listening to podcasts. And I'm not a super creative guy. I don't think of these things. But I thought, you know what? That's right. We ought to. And so one of the assignments for our next meeting is, let's put together a list of podcasts that you listen to or that you're aware of that we should be listening to. There's one connected with the Missouri Synod called Issues, Etc. Wide-ranging podcast. Very active. New episodes every day, multiple episodes every day. And there's a lot of important stuff. They don't have just Missouri folks on there. We meet twice a year. I brought this along for a couple of reasons. So this binder represents the material from our meeting at the end of September. See why I say you have to have people who are willing to prepare for meetings. Now, this is maybe a little on the large side, but for those 3 pastors who were brand new and that one semprof who were brand new, it's like, welcome to the CICR. We're not going to read through this at the meeting. I expect that when you get there and that item shows up on the agenda, that you will be ready to discuss whatever it is that's in there, you know. because I've read it. And it's kind of like the syllabus for class. I tell students, read it, know what's in it, because I do. You know, I don't want something to come up during the semester and bite you, because I know what's in there and you didn't know. So we meet twice a year. Our meetings start Thursday at 1:30 so that the Sun guys can teach their Thursday classes and get down to our Synod headquarters in Waukesha. And then we go into about 5 o'clock. Sometimes we go into the evening if we have to after supper. And then we come back the next morning at 8, and we go until noon generally. But again, we'll stay later than that if we have to. Jill is the lady who helps us there at the Synod headquarters. She makes all of the arrangements there. She finds a place for us to meet. She makes the lodging arrangements for us. She makes sure we have something to eat while we're there. She arranged a wonderful buffet from Panera Bread this last time we were there. There were really good sandwiches and salads that we had to choose from. So I'm very grateful to Jill. She handles all of those behind the scenes details. It would be really, really hard to pull these meetings off if you didn't have somebody doing that. So twice a year we meet then. In North America, we have a relationship with the ELS, the Evangelical Lutheran Synod, and so we have a contact person for that. That right now is David Barkle, pastor up in the cities. He took over for the pastor who just retired. So what we ask Pastor Barkle to do is we ask Pastor Barkle to go to their convention every year. So they meet in Mankato every year. We ask him, please attend the entire convention so that we know what's going on there. Give us your take on what's going on in the ELS. We have the forum every other year. It's something that the chairman of the CICR attends, along with people, administrators from all other areas of Synod. And that happens 1 year in Mankato and 1 year in Pewaukee at our Synod headquarters. So I think the next time it'll be in Pewaukee in 2026. Then every year the doctrine committees meet of the two groups, so that's the COP and the ELS doctrine committees. That happens every year. It happens in Mankato at the end of January. Used to be that the CICR met with the ELS. But what happened is the ELS always wanted to know about what some WELS pastor was doing in Texas or what some WELS pastor was doing in Washington, because they keep their eye on these things. And we're like, we have no idea. That's not what we are, that's not what we do. You'd have to ask the COP. You have to ask the COP. You have to ask the COP. So finally we said, well, maybe we're not the folks you should be meeting with. Maybe you should be meeting with the COP. Because they're the ones who have the answers to the questions that you're asking. And so I sit in just because it's an inter-church relations thing. I'm not a member of the doctrine committee, so I just sit and take notes, and I don't speak unless I'm spoken to. Reformation lectures is another way we stay in contact. End of this month, they have the Tigan lectures over in Mankato, and Pastor Barkle will attend that. And then we want personal contact. Pastor Barkle, you know what? Meet ELS people. Tom Nass used to be the contact for the ELS, and he's told me I was that long enough, and I attended enough of their conventions that I knew every single pastor in the ELS. And that's just Tom. So kind of like that's the challenge I put out to Pastor Barkle. That's the standard. Know every pastor in the ELS. Then the Missouri Synod, we have our annual informal talks. President Schrader is responsible for that work. It does involve CICR representation, but also the WELS is represented there by people not on the CICR. That happens every year in December. They like to go down where it's warm. And then we also send one of our CICR members. We have an LCMS contact person. That's now Dave Bivens from the seminary. we'll ask him to attend these informal talks in our behalf and to attend the Missouri Synod Convention to know, what's going on there. We're super interested with President Harrison in the Missouri Synod. The Missouri Synod is changing. So we always want to know, like, when he's up for election, tell us about that. What was the vote? What was the discussion? Who's being elected as district presidents? And are they Harrison people or are they non-Harrison people? These are the kinds of things that, so the Missouri Synod has a vote at their convention about the practice of communion. Should it be open communion? Anyone can come. Should it be closed communion? And so we want to know, the vote is 88% for closed communion, 12% against closed communion at the convention. We want somebody there who heard this discussion, who heard this debate, because it helps us keep our pulse on what's going on in the Missouri Synod. Then the CLC, there are no talks at this point, there are no meetings. We just send somebody now to attend their convention. That too is an important thing to do because not everyone in the CLC is of one mind when it comes to the CLC's non-relationship with the Wisconsin Synod. There's an old guard and there are younger folks. And there are some in the CLC who like to have these personal contacts and conversations with the Wells and Els folks who come to their convention. And we want to maintain those relationships. So we do have a contact with their president, but we also have contact with their pastorate through attendance at their convention. They know who we are. They can reach out to us. They know somebody. Then we have our international work. Now I get to our World Mission 1 team. So this was Larry's brainchild a number of years ago, I think maybe 5 years ago, and I think it was a great idea. So in every part of the world, the work of world missions is handled by a team. And the team consists of everyone who has a vested interest in the work in that part of the world. So obviously the missionaries are a part of that team. But the CICR has a vested interest in the work going on around the world because we have sister churches all around the world. We have a vested interest. So we are members on that team. And this, to circle back to an earlier thing, now when an issue arises with a sister church, we have somebody on the front lines. We have somebody on the mission team. We know who those people are. We know the history of the relationship. We know how the problem developed and what the issue is. And we know that now firsthand because we have a guy who's a member of that team, and he meets with that team and is involved in what that team has going on. That's been a real help. Also on these teams are a PSI representative, Pastoral Studies Institute. So they're responsible for pastor training worldwide. So they consult with sister churches as far as their pastor training curriculum and practice, or if a pastor comes to us fully trained and now wants a relationship with the Wisconsin Synod, the CICR has a partner on that mission team with our seminary, and it's pastor training program for other cultures. And we can say, all right, we're gonna connect with you now, PSI person, to help us vet this trained pastor who comes to us and wants to enter into our fellowship. You've got the expertise there. So I am a member of the Europe team. John Billets and Brad Wardell are members of the Africa team. Used to be just one person, but there's so much going on in Africa, we needed to double our representation there. Dan Voigt, who is a Spanish-speaking guy, is a member of the Latin America team. We're super happy finally to have someone on that team who speaks Spanish because everything on the Latin America mission team is done in Spanish. And then we have John Kelpine and Nick Schmuller, who are members of the Asia-Oceania team, because that is such a vast area of the world with so many groups. Again, we needed more than one individual on that team. How a person functions on a team is up to the individual and the team. So a guy like, I meet regularly. Every time the Europe team meets, I meet. John and Billets and Brad Wardell with the One Africa team, they're meeting at least once a week, maybe more than once a week with that team. So this, obviously there's a 6-hour time difference here, which means you have to get up early in the morning to meet with these teams. Monday morning, 6 a.m. Have a Zoom. That's how it works. Plus Brad and the One Africa team has a very, very active WhatsApp thing going on. WhatsApp is like, it's a text service, but a lot of international people use it. So they're constantly getting messages on WhatsApp and following discussions on WhatsApp. I think that in Asia, Oceania, and Latin America, they meet with the one team less often, but they do meet. Being a part of this one team also means that you travel, for each team meets annually. So this past summer I traveled, it was just to our Synod headquarters for the annual meeting. I have also traveled to Europe for that annual meeting. Both John Kelpine and Nick Schmuller have traveled to into some place in Asia. Thailand, I think maybe was one place, for annual meetings there. Brad Wardell and John Billets have traveled to Africa for annual meetings there. So increasingly, this is a responsibility for our one team members, that you need to be able to travel internationally. Timing isn't always so great there. The first time I went to Europe, it was in the middle of October. I do have other stuff going on in the middle of October, like school. But it's got to be done. We also, to do our work internationally, are involved with the CELC, Confessional Evangelical Lutheran Conference. The CELC meets regionally. There was a meeting in Africa last year or the year before. The Europe region is the most active. It meets every year. The Asia-Oceania had a regional meeting this past summer. John Kelpine traveled to Indonesia to be at that meeting. One Latin America, the way they operate there is different. They don't have regional CELC meetings, because to have one would really mean they've got an international church body there. So when that church body meets in convention, that is, for all practical purposes, a regional CELC. It has the same function, it doesn't have the name. We try and support these gatherings, the CICR does. You maybe, if you are signed up to get the Ministry of Christian Giving letters from the Synod, we will solicit support for people for church bodies to attend these meetings. International, I mean, the travel, of course, isn't cheap. And most of the time, almost without exception, in these sister churches, pastors are doing that work part-time. And so when their church can't afford to send them, so quite often they're traveling on their own dime. And so we want to provide them with some travel support. It's not, all that inexpensive for someone to travel from Indonesia to Africa for an international CELC meeting. So we want to, and yet it's important. I mentioned before that when you are a tiny little group of 35 people and you're feeling alone in the world, there is great value in being able to sit down face to face. It's one thing to talk to my grandkids on Zoom. It's a very different thing to be in the living room on the floor with them. And this little church body, sure, it could Zoom with somebody in Africa. But there's something to be said for being in the same room with these people. The encouragement, the support, and we try and support that by soliciting gifts, asking for gifts from WELS members to enable folks to travel. We just did that at the end of August with the upcoming international CELC meeting, which is in Africa, for the first time in Africa, which is interesting. Those are our oldest sister churches there. For the first time, we'll meet in Africa in 2026. We had our largest attendance ever at the last one 3 years ago in Seoul, South Korea. The reason we had our largest attendance ever is that we were able to provide $45,000 in travel subsidy. Not all of it came from the CICR, but a sizable portion came from the CICR. Otherwise, I mean, folks just can't afford to attend. All right, looking at different parts of the world, this is the most active, most interesting, most exciting part of the world, Africa. I remember a few years ago, before I became chairman, the previous chairman, John Brenner, gave us an article to read. It was by a Missouri Synod guy who had been involved in church relations. And the thing I still remember to this day is that the point of the article was, in the not too distant future, I would not be surprised, the author said, if Africa were the country, the continent, sending missionaries to the United States. And so it just is fascinating to me to watch confessional Lutheranism grow in Africa. Look at all the places where we either have mission partners, are doing exploratory mission work, and they're especially using what's called the TEL network, reaching out. I always think of it as sowing digital seeds. You are reaching out with the Word of God, and you're doing it online. You're scattering the seed of the Word in the broadest possible way. And from them, you are developing then personal, individual contacts. So, here are things we have going on the left. These are sister churches we have relationships with. Nigeria, Cameroon, our oldest missions in Malawi and Zambia, Ethiopia, Kenya, a group in Kenya that comes through the ELS, and Uganda. You asked about Pastor Musa, who was at the convention this past summer. These are all groups we're currently working with in Africa, our one teams. The Evangelical Church of the Augsburg Confession. I'm not going to remember off the top of my head what African country these groups are in. We call them Ikaku. Not terribly promising currently, but also not completely at an end. The Confessional Lutheran Synod of Uganda, a second group in Uganda. This one is very promising. Africa Missions Evangelical Church, Tanzania. If you follow synodical things closely, you will know that we had a bit of a hiccup here in the relationship. It was supposed to, this past convention, move over here. That didn't happen. We won't get into that now. It will happen. It will happen at the next convention. This is an independent congregation. This is an independent congregation. Then we have, look, what's super interesting to me about this one is the language. Who would have ever thought that the Wisconsin Synod needed missionaries who would be able to speak French? But in Africa, the WELS needs people who speak French. We need materials, confessional Lutheran materials in French. We once, at one time, the breakup of the Synodical Conference, were in fellowship with a church body in France. They stuck with the Missouri Synod. I don't know if they still exist today. Another independent congregation in Liberia, Community of Evangelical Lutheran Churches of Central Africa, CELAC, promising there. A second French group in Congo. I can't pronounce these. I believe these are both in Congo. So we are currently, with almost all of these, moving toward having them over here, establishing fellowship relationships with them. And we're doing this in partnership with our one team in Africa. Brad Wardell and John Billets are very busy men. Asia, Oceania, again, you can see our mission partners there. This massive area of the world. where the vast majority of the world's population lives. And you know, if you just look at the names of the countries there are some surprising names. This one is interesting, New Zealand. Just our interconnected global world. We now have exploratory work in New Zealand because members of the church in Hong Kong left Hong Kong once it returned to Chinese control. A large portion left Hong Kong and they moved to New Zealand and Australia. And so now we have sent 2 missionaries to live in Australia. They also go over to New Zealand because we're trying to build something there with these Chinese speakers who come from Hong Kong. This is the world in which we live. So we have, again on the left, our church, long time in Japan. We have 2 different groups in Australia. One is WELS connected, one is ELS connected. We have this congregation in the Philippines. There's I think a second group in the Philippines. There's a church in Indonesia. Here we have 2 groups in India. One is connected with the ELS. That's sometimes how we handle squabbles between sisters, is that we say to one of the groups, well, why don't you work with the ELS? And then the other group, you know, can work with us, and that's how we manage the relationship. It's not ideal, but it is what happens. Taiwan, Hong Kong, and then the ELS has something in South Korea. The Chinese Confessional Evangelical Lutheran Federation. So we have the East Asia Lutheran Synod, and then we have this group, the CCELF. It's an attempt to form a church body in a different way than we had tried in the past. Something that's particular to Chinese culture. So one of the things that Larry and our world mission teams have helped us understand is that we in the Confessional Lutheran West, we love pieces of paper. We love documents. And what we do with these pieces of paper is we write down very, very carefully what we believe, and we agonize over the individual words. And we spell out very clearly what we reject. These are these battle scars, because we've been through some stuff. And so we write it down very carefully, and we give that piece of paper to somebody, and we say, do you agree with what's on that piece of paper? And if they say yes, then we say, good, we have a relationship with each other. This is not how things work everywhere in the world. In Africa, for example, as I understand it, they could care less about any piece of paper. They could care less. What they want is they want to know you. They want a relationship with you. It's the same way in East Asia. I want a relationship with you, a personal relationship. I know you. I've talked with you, and you know me, and you've talked with me, and we understand each other. We agree with each other, and we've got this personal relationship with each other. You want to put that down on a piece of paper? Okay, I guess. I mean, if you think that's important, but I don't need that piece of paper. So we tried, in Asia, we tried to unite around a piece of paper. Didn't work. Didn't work. We had an issue between folks. Why? Because the folks didn't have a relationship with each other. So we're trying to do something again in this part of the world, but we're doing it in a very different way. Interesting places like Nepal, Vietnam. Can you imagine that? This communist place. We have a relationship with the Hmong Evangelical Lutheran Church. We're waiting at this point. Their entire leadership is on board with us. What we're really waiting for is for the doctrine to spread out broadly. This is a group of tens of thousands of people with hundreds of pastors. We're waiting for that doctrine to spread out broadly. Myanmar, Schmuller talks on the phone every week with a pastor from Myanmar. It's been impossible to travel there this spring. However, I think Schmuller is planning to travel somewhere to meet with the guy he's been talking to on the phone, online for 2 or 3 years now. Every week. Oman, Pakistan, United Arab Emirates, Bangladesh, Malaysia, these places with Muslim populations and leadership. We have small groups there. And then in Thailand and Laos, just super interesting things. There are a couple other places here where we're working that, well, we don't put those names out because those folks could really get in trouble. Europe, this is the area I know most about. I have to ask, Jill maybe can tell me, I have to ask Larry, what in the world do we have going on in Moldova? I've never heard that in my life, and I've been on the Europe team. I've been on the CICR for almost 12 years and the Europe team for 5, I think. I have no idea what's going on in Moldova. My hunch is Larry doesn't either. But maybe there's some person there I don't know about. Jill's going to find out for us.
I am not today, but I am going to find out for you.
All right, so here's LBK. We've got an independent congregation in Finland, way up north. Then we've got Norway, Sweden. We've got 2 independent congregations in Sweden, one around Stockholm, one around Umeå. Then we have our church in Germany. We have an independent congregation in Würzburg. Then there's the church in Latvia, Portugal, the church in Brazil. Why is the church in Brazil listed under Europe? Because the church in Brazil is a Portuguese-speaking church, and it's connected with our sister church in Portugal. This is actually an evangelism outreach effort of our church in Portugal. That's why it is here with Europe. We have Albania, a small group. We've got our church in Russia. We've got the ELS church in the Czech Republic. That's another sad story. We've got the congregation in Bulgaria. We've got the Ukrainian Lutheran church. This, of course, is an interesting thing. I have to imagine that once that war ends, the CICR will be more involved in Russia and Ukraine. The ELS has their Thoughts of Faith, Gift of Life, and then, this is super interesting. I didn't put out the whole name because this is just a monstrously long name. But this old German-speaking congregation of German origin in Mykolaiv in Ukraine reached out to the church in Germany. The church in Germany said, yeah, we can't really help you, but Luke Wolfgram is in Europe. I bet he can help you because he speaks Russian. And so, sure enough, so now Luke has been meeting with the leadership of this congregation, 2 laymen who would like to become pastors, and he's been meeting with them for 2 years, I think, online. Latin America, you can see where we're working there. And here are the groups we have relationships with. Mexico, we do have a Brazilian group under, back when we had missions. I said Dave Bivens was a missionary in Brazil, so this is not connected with the outreach from out of Portugal. We have this new synod, Iglesia Cristo-Wels Internacional. I like to call it ICWI, but World Missions doesn't like that acronym. It sounds bad. It sounds too much like icky. So we don't want people to make that connection, but it's just easier. Then we have a church in Colombia, Bolivia. We have Venezuela, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Puerto Rico, individual congregations in Bolivia and Mexico. Peru is an ELS mission, and Chile is an ELS mission. We have relationships with all these churches. So the names of the places that I showed you on the screen, this is what ultimately the CICR is responsible for doing, for maintaining those relationships. We bear responsibility before the synod. Now, we work in partnership with our one teams to do that. This was Larry's brainchild again. Our world missions, they have people on the ground. They know these folks best. But now we're plugged into those one teams. We can be on the front lines of those relationships. All right, well, I have just one more thing for you. And that is the process we follow when a church body wants to enter into a relationship with us. The two key things are time and presence. We'll spend 5+ years with a church body before we enter into a relationship with it. 5+ years, and we will have multiple personal contacts, time and presence. So before something comes to the Synod and Convention, we want you to know we have spent years with this group, and we know the people personally. We have a preliminary stage in which the basic question is, what do you want from us? Do you want a doctrinal relationship with us, or do you just want money from us? There's a lot of groups just want money from us. Remember being contacted by a guy in Poland. I want to be in fellowship with the Wisconsin Synod, so we send an email. Here's all kinds of doctrinal questions we have. Never heard from him again. Money, that's what they want. So what do they want? If they want doctrinal fellowship, we begin a 4-stage process that unfolds over years. First, in stage 1, it's a simple conversation about law and gospel. We follow the outline of Luther's catechisms. We want to begin, it's doctrinal fellowship. We want to begin talking doctrine with you, spending time with you, meeting you, getting to know you. We're going to travel to where you are, if that's at all possible. And our world missionaries are going to do this. This is our world missionaries here and here. Stage 2 is the biggest stage. If we make it past Luther's small catechism and things look good, now this is the big one. This is where the doctrinal discussions really become full-blown. That's where the focus is. We'll explore every avenue of Lutheran doctrine. These are more of our confessions, the Augsburg Confession and the Apology, the small called articles. We'll give you this we believe in the doctrinal statements of the Wells, so you can know everything that we believe. We're then going to ask you for your own doctrinal statement. This is where we've learned things from world mission. Like the Africans will say to us, what do you want? You want a piece of paper? But I already know you. I already know what you believe. And I know you and I believe the same thing, and we'll say that's great and everything, but we're about paper. This is how we work in our culture, and so we got to meet here halfway. And so they'll give us their doctrinal statement. Our One Africa team has helped. It's been a work in progress. How do you help a church body that doesn't really care about a piece of paper to write a doctrinal statement on a piece of paper? They're like, how do you do that? So our world mission team in Africa has developed a very nice process. We want to know from you, the stuff you read here, please tell us in writing you agree with it. We also want you to ask your people, what are things that all of us agree on? What are the most important things to us? Put that down on paper. What are things where maybe we would have some questions among the people in our group? Well, work out those questions and tell us on paper what the answers to those questions are. And then, what things in your culture are particularly troublesome, where you need to put down on a piece of paper what it is you believe and teach. Like in the Wisconsin Synod, we do not have a doctrinal statement on polygamy. We're against it, but we don't have a doctrinal statement on it. We've never had a fight about polygamy. But you know what? In Africa, every doctrinal statement has a statement on polygamy. That's their battle scar. And this is a field visit here by the CICR guy. If this is a church in Africa, either Brad or John is going to be traveling to Africa. If this is a church body in Asia, Oceania, either John Kelpine or Nick Schmoller is going to be traveling. If this is a church in Europe, I'll be traveling. Stage 3, if we make it past, so they give us their doctrinal statement and they give us their constitution, and the CICR, we're picky. We're super picky. It's like, well, we don't like how you said that, and why doesn't it say that, and what you should really use that word here, and why did you have that Bible passage, and you really should have that Bible passage. So we're super picky. And so we review their stuff. Here we want to see how their doctrine is lived out in practice, at least on paper. And then we send this back to them. We send our CICR guy over there again, second trip, and we say, you know what, talk about this stuff with them and see what they say. See what they're gonna, what changes they're gonna make here. Also, while you're there, go visit as many of their people and congregations as you can and see what they're actually doing on a Sunday morning. See what their worship looks like. See it with your own eyes, so that when it's time to recommend fellowship, we're not just taking somebody else's word for it. Our own people have actually been there. They've been involved from the very start, because they're on the one teams. They've been involved from the very start. They've been there hopefully twice, definitely at least once, but hopefully twice themselves. They've sat across the table with these folks, and they've developed a personal relationship, and they can say to us, and then we can say to the Synod and Convention, we're united with them. Their doctrine is the same as ours, and so is their practice. That is the work of the Commission on Interchurch Relations. Yes, ma'am.
Do the other congregations internationally get frustrated with the 5-year process?
I have not heard that they have. I've not heard that they have. It depends upon individuals, depends a bit upon individuals and their personality. Some of us are by nature more impatient than others. But we do want to be thorough. We do want to be thorough.
So are all those statements from different churches and ours translated into the languages?
Usually we get them in English, which is kind of a frustration of mine, because quite often the English is what has been, we get it through an online translation service like Google Translate or something. We've said multiple times, we will pay for the cost of a professional translation. These documents matter to us. And so don't feel that you have to try and put them into English yourself. We will see to it. Give them to us in your native language, and we will have them translated into English. Hasn't happened yet. But it is, the CICR has a budget line in the Synod budget to support. That's mainly for these field visits as part of the 4 stages process and our meetings twice a year. We also have a separate project fund that we can use for that, to support those kinds of expenses. We also are very much interested, these are the kinds of things Larry gets us to think about. We're very much interested in making sure that every sister church has our Lutheran confessions. It may surprise you that the Lutheran confessions do not exist or had not existed in the Hmong language, of which there are different variations, different dialects, I suppose we'd call them. And Larry asked us at a meeting once, well, would we ever declare fellowship with a church that doesn't have the Lutheran confessions in their own language? And our initial reaction was, of course not, Larry, that's a silly question. And he was like, really? I mean, even if we knew that they agreed agreed doctrinally with us? And our response was kind of a middle road. Well, what we're going to do is, we're going to do everything we can to make sure they have the Lutheran confessions in their language. That's what we're going to do. We are, after all, a confessional Lutheran church body. And sometimes that might be part of the reason for the delay. Anything else?
I was just impressed at the importance that you put in face-to-face communication with all the media and stuff. There's something about a handshake that makes all the difference in the world.
Presence. Yep, absolutely. It's another reason why we really like being a part of the one teams. And we ask guys to do this thing and travel, international travel. This is not easy. To get on a plane and fly 16 hours to South Korea, 12 hours to Africa. This is not easy. And to do it, you ask people who are already busy, because this is all volunteer.
They're not young.
And they're not young, right? And the synod rules are you travel coach. Those are the rules. You travel coach. So, I mean, that's, 16 hours is a long time for a guy my height with a 32-inch seat pitch. I pay very close attention to seat pitch, which is the space for my knees. So, please pray for our CICR. We ask guys to do a lot, and it's responsible work that they're asked to do.